The best CAS aircraft for Japan in Hearts of Iron 4. It is 936. You are soon to go to war against China. China has a very pathetic air force. However, the air zones in China are quite far apart, so range is a high priority for you. To begin with, you need to find yourself a basic carrier airframe. Now this baby is more expensive, but you can make it more cheaper if you prioritize naval aircraft construction. So let's do that. Reducing the cost of a carrier CAS by 20%. And there we go. The carrier airframe now is cheaper than the basic plane. One of the downsides of carrier-based aircraft, though, is they don't have as good stats, like for like. You want to see the difference? Basic airframe. Carrier doesn't have as much agility, weighs slightly more, and of course costs more, but in this circumstance costs less. It's just a Japan thing. Basic carrier airframe. Gonna go for bomb locks, biggest engine you've got, single engine, and then add on a basic machine gun. What you tend to find is the Soviet Union will send a few planes to China, so you need some dogfight potential with some air attack to be able to shoot those planes down. Otherwise, they will always exist, and they're only going to lose planes from attrition from accidents. So a little bit of air attack goes a long way. Times 4 light machine guns for the most air attack. Click close air support to check your weight to thrust ratio. Top it off. A light machine gun. Now here is a biggie. Aluminium is a problem for Japan. Even more so if you don't take out China, because that's where you get a lot of your exploit for resources for aluminium from. But in the long run, because you want to focus more on numbers, my advice is to go for non-strategic materials, reducing the cost by 7.5%, making it even cheaper, and also reducing the aluminium cost. And to begin with, you can use the only mile you've got access to. At the very start of the game, this will do. Once again, it does close air support damage, which you're going to use mostly against China. And with this, you don't even need to make very good divisions to fight the Chinese. Anything like infantry with support will do. Range improvements. Let's do this. And to top it off, you know what I'm going to do here, right? You're going to replace the turret with an extra fuel tank. At the end of the day, range is crucial for Japan because everywhere you're going to be fighting has a lot of range problems. And remember, if the range is far, you will take a penalty to your air efficiency, meaning less of the stats of the plane will be projected into that new region, less air attack, less air defense, less close air support damage. And you want to project as many of those stats as possible. The added beauty of going for bomb locks is you can use these planes and double them up for using them as naval strike. And naval strike deals with very large air regions. Look at the size of these. But anything that gives extra range will help out in the long run. If you're finding yourself having issues with aluminium, of course, non-strategic materials is important. But if you're not and you want to squeeze as much range as possible, my advice is double up on your extra fuel tanks. Once again, the stats don't matter as much because the Chinese Air Force isn't very good. You want to focus on dropping those bombs, but secondary, you can use this later on as a device to sink enemy ships in the Pacific using naval strike with bomb locks. Oh, did I also mention this is a carrier plane too? So you can put these on your carriers. Nice. You now have survivability studies, and you also have access to the heavy machine gun, and you also have access to cannons. What difference does this make? Not a lot. You can replace the light machine guns with heavy machine guns just to give a little bit more air attack projection, but overall this plane pretty much stays the same. Either focusing on numbers, keeping the aluminium production down by going for non-strategic materials, or double downing on the range. In this circumstance, you probably want to min-max by staying on light machine guns if you want the most adequate range. And this is the best combination for range-wise. When it comes down to dogfighting, it's not something you want to focus on as Japan early on, because once again, you're not going to be fighting a very powerful air force to begin with. You have access to the new small airframe, which unlocks a new slot and a bunch of new stats such as agility and range, but the plane is more heavy, be aware of that. You also have access to larger bombs as well. You have access to bigger, more powerful torpedoes, and also, most importantly, definitely most importantly, you now have access to the bigger engine, which means you can put more stuff on your plane. A lot of the time, when you research the new chassis, you get access to extra slots to equip your planes with more stuff. But then you can't put more stuff on it because they weigh more. Then you need a more powerful engine to be able to add on more stuff. So it goes in kind of a big circle overall. At this point, if you are still fighting China, I wouldn't recommend you upgrade your planes. I would actually recommend you just keep producing this. Either going for the range version, which is this, or going for the air attack version, which is this. Be aware too, the heavy machine guns have an added bonus which give extra ground attack. Can you see that? When on logistical strikes, +1 ground attack. Will you be using logistical strikes against China? Probably not, because their army's so out of date, more than likely it's not even using trains. But it's just a nice to know, I suppose. Be aware too, in 1940 you have access to the bigger bomb locks, meaning you'll do more ground support damage. Overall, if you are doing lots of ground attack, it is worthwhile, so my recommendation is to do it. Now you must do a big and think about the big picture here. China more than likely is dead. You'll be thinking about the Philippines, you'll be thinking about Malaysia and Indonesia, you'll be thinking about the British Raj. One thing that has in common with a lot of these regions is you have to travel quite a long range to get to them. If you are going to be fighting enemy planes in these regions, the capacity for the amount of planes they can put in these regions is limited. So even if they have a state-of-the-art plane like the Spitfire, and your planes are kind of like a little bit dated because they don't have as much air attack or air defense, don't worry about it. Because more than likely, you'll be able to put more planes in these regions to be able to fight them off, just winning with sure numbers. There is a possibility in Malaya, if they put up quite a lot of planes, it might be a little bit more difficult. But if you played your cards right and you've got big numbers and you've taken defeat in China, at this point you won't have that problem. Also, it's worth to know that if you're at this point, you more than likely have got prospect for resources happening in China, allowing you to extract more aluminium. So the advantage of taking advantage of non-strategic resources drops a little. And remember as well, it also reduces your air defense, because technically you're making the planes out of wood and bamboo, I presume, and not aluminum. So with that in mind, we are going to go for an improved carrier airframe, because remember that ends up being cheaper. You want to focus on pure stats by going for the heavy machine guns. Biggest possible engine. At this point, you would unlock the new Mayo. And I'll be fair, both of the options are pretty good. You're either going to go for range focus, which does what it says it is, it gives you range, or agility focus, which gives you the ability to win. I'll be fair with you, I think range focus is better in this circumstance. Seeing as this is a CAS-based build though, we are going to focus primarily on CAS. So in this case, it is going to be improved carrier airframe, with the first one going to be the heavy bomb lock, followed up by heavy machine gun, heavy machine gun. Now this is where you've got to be very careful, because you have to balance your weight and thrust ratio, and it might even involve removing some machine guns. So extra fuel tanks is no brainer because you want the range. Ideally it'd be kind of better if you could double up on the fuel tanks. However, we're having in a problem for weight ratio here, so what I would recommend in this case is drop down so you can just get the right amount of weight ratio. In this case, it will be a single heavy machine gun. Now you have to play this one by ear. Remember, this is a more advanced plane. It is going to require more aluminium, and in that circumstance you might need to go for non-strategic materials. Don't be disheartened. At the end of the day, losing that little bit of air defense is not going to be the end of the world. If you can keep up with the production of the allies in these regions and have more planes within their regions, you'll end up better in them in the combat anyway, even if they have got better stats than you. Alternatively, if you don't want to go crazy when it comes down to range, what you could top it off with is by going for your classic self-sealing fuel tanks. This will cause rubber problems, but when you secure Indonesia, that problem will suddenly be fixed. 500 rubber. Wow. And then also Sumatra giving you an additional 200 rubber as well. Your rubber problems will end. There you go. And that's a perfect balance of weight and thrust, giving you a perfect balance between air defense, air attack, and agility, but also giving you that extra bite for CAS. Remember, we're showing you a CAS build here. And the flexibility of a CAS build for Japan is not only can be used for dogfighting and air superiority, but it also can be used for close air support as well as naval striking. Which, as you imagine, in Japan, you do a lot of that. Navy Japan, is that a thing? Yes. But if you are in a situation where things just aren't working for you, my advice to you is go back to the basic bomb lock and try your absolute best to try and put as much machine gun power onto this aircraft as possible. And that is actually doable. Probably range is not the best. Probably going for armor will be better to project your stats the best. Now you're getting the perfect ratio between air attack, air defense, and agility, but you're just not taking advantage of the best technology for bombs. This is just the instance where the allies are completely dominating you in the air, and you need to fight them 1-for-1 for stats. Now you're probably going to ask, why are you adding bombs onto this if it's a dogfighting aircraft? That's a good question, because this specific build is CAS orientated. And my advice to you is when you do your air doctrine, you are going to go down battlefield support, which gives you this. And if it is considered a close air support by the first module being a bomb, it gives a 20% bonus to agility. Inadvertently, around the houses, around the outside, you will have more agility anyway if you go down this build specifically for you as Japan. Welcome to the hypothetical of a late game scenario where you've technically already won, or you should have. So in this circumstance, it has become 1944. In all fairness, you would have defeated Indonesia, Malaysia, probably either invited Siam to your faction or invaded them and completely dumpstered the Raj. Or you're going to be joining Germany in Europe, or you're going to be invading the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union. That cracks open a new can of worms of problems. Advanced small airframe, large cannons, and the big engine. But top that off, you will have access to more stuff, such as you have access to rockets at this point, and you also have access to the best anti-tank ground attack support weapons, which are part of the module for anti-tank. Let's have a look what we can do. So remember, this is still going to be a carrier-based aircraft because this gives the biggest overall discount. And then to top that off as well, you'll add on the mile that's applicable, which in this case we're going to go for the range guy. Maximize the engine. Remember, the first one is going to be for bombs. So is it a situation where the air war is technically over and it's already won? In this case, an anti-tank gun will be sufficient, and the amount of ground support damage here will be eye-wateringly high. Probably, though, the Soviet Union has a massive air force and the Allies have a technological advantage. In this case, this is going to be a bit of a rare one. But if you want to play it safe, my advice is go for rocket rails because this maintains your agility when you're doing close air support attacks. Technically, this is your fighter plane CAS, but has close air support damage. And then top it off, you want to project as many stats as possible by going for the machine guns. Oh, the last one has to be another bomb. So in this case, you can go for double rocket rails, I suppose, which overall gives you more overall ground attack. Okay, so what's the problem with this aircraft now? Range. The range is absolutely dismal. So in this case, what you can do is extra fuel. We've still got extra thrust to work with. So in that circumstance, more than likely, we'll probably add extra stats onto this aircraft by doubling the amount of air defense. That's probably the most adequate. Be aware you need rubber for this because this adds +1 rubber per mil assigned to this production line. But overall, this is an unbelievably awesome CAS. It's such a long-range CAS, and it's such amazing damage. Now, I'll admit this is a bit of a strange one because if you are fighting over these air regions in the Far East here, as you can see, they are quite far away. The infrastructure is quite awful. You have to build airports. But overall, this plane will have the ability to stretch over those unbelievably long regions and actually bomb adequately in those said regions. I will argue at this point, because the weight to thrust ratio is so far apart, what you could probably do is add a heavy bomb lock on. And now you're gaining 12 ground attack. That's amazing. Remember, the final slot can't be machine guns. But overall, the amount of stats you gain from that is amazing. If it comes down to it, you're not winning those battles. You're not winning them. They're not going in your favor. In this case, you want to focus and retreat back from range and go back to raw stats and firepower. So you want to be focused at raw on armor. Remember, it is a CAS aircraft because we need that for the doctrine. So that's the reason why the first slot is occupied by bombs. But the rest of it is going to be occupied by machine guns, giving a solid amount of air defense, a solid amount of air attack, and a solid amount of agility. But the ability to project damage over range is more limited, due to the fact that you've got no range improvements for this aircraft. Be aware, rocket rails will give you the best bang for your buck for agility. It is a CAS that's the best at dogfighting, basically. But if you want it to be more multi-purpose, you are going to have to replace this with a big bomb. In this case, it is going to be the heavy bomb locks, because now you've got the ability to do naval strikes. And remember, you're Japan. You are going to be doing lots of naval strikes. But remember, it's 1944. In that circumstance, have you already technically won the air war? Probably. So remember, build your aircraft based upon what's actually happening. If you are losing the air war and you don't have air superiority, you want to focus on air defense and agility. If you're dominating the air, then more likely you want to focus more on range so you can project those stats over a longer distance. Or in some cases, just the best of both might work out best for you. Where is air design going? Well, in this case, it is going to be adding on the modern small aircraft, the more advanced cannons, the more advanced torpedoes that we're not going to use. And finally, last but definitely not least, we have access to jet engines. Actually, one extra final note as well. I always forget about this, but Guided Missile 3 gives you option for the guided anti-ship missile. It doesn't do the best damage. Torpedoes do the most damage, but it has the best overall accuracy. When it hits incredibly hard. So what you could do now at this point, presuming you've won the air war, is you could build yourself like a hybrid aircraft. So it could do something like that with bombs, and then on the final slot you can add something like, for some reason the final slot you can't add a guided missile on. Oh, it can be on the end. Oh, it has to be a torpedo. Right, okay. So what this little yellow exclamation mark here is basically telling you the stats of these two can't be combined. So you can't use the naval strike of this one on the naval strike of this one combined. Basically, if it's on a close air support, it's using bombs. And if it's on a naval strike, it's using the guided anti-ship missiles. And then in the middle, of course, you can add on the machine guns as you would normally do. When it comes down to jet engines, they're kind of a dogfighting tool because they give the biggest boost to agility and max speed, but then you lose range. So, and then you also lose your thrust as well. So it's not exactly the best engine overall. It's kind of a fighter plane style bonus. We'll go for extra fuel tanks, extra fuel tanks. We're overweight now. It's not going to work. Self-sealing. Ends up something a little bit like this. Overall, with such a late game scenario, I'd feel like I'd want to focus more on range. But remember, this is what I refer to as a plane that kind of does everything. It is a close air support damaging machine. It also has unbelievably demolishing power when it comes out of fighting enemy ships. But then it also can project its stats as well. I suppose at this point, it leans slightly more towards a naval bomber because it's got its guided missile and it focuses on range as well. But then it leans a little bit back when it focuses on jet engine. So probably the first slot probably should be rocket rails, which frees up so much weight. So in that case, we'll go for something like this. Well, and truly is the jack of all trades. It has close air support, which is probably its weakest job because it only does a 4 close air support attack. But it has the ability to do it. It projects awesome stats for defense, air attack, and agility, so it's a dogfighting machine. Plus, it's got jet engines for the extra boost to agility and max speed. Once again, dogfighting machine. Probably out of the 3 jobs it can do, the best and the final job it can do is naval striking, which incredible naval strike damage and targeting accuracy is absolutely insane. And of course, with a range of 1,500, it can capture these big regions of the Pacific. But remember, at this point, you've kind of already won the game. Ooh, I've just spotted something. So it turns out the weight of a guided missile is huge. They're insanely heavy. So would it even be possible to equip this on? No. It is such an incredibly heavy bomb. It's not even compatible with the jet engine. So in that circumstance, you do have to go for the most advanced naval strike. Yeah, you'd have to go for that. To be fair, I'll say hand on heart, I've never had much luck with the jack of all trades style aircraft. Ones that kind of do everything don't seem to work out very well. You either want to lean towards naval striking by going for a traditional Mark IV engine, or you want to focus more on agility stats such as rockets, rails, and the jet engine. What you could do, if price isn't a problem, you could go for the dual jet engines if you wanted to, but even then they don't really give you that much optimal thrust overall. We're entering the world of fantasy now, and you can see I'm if, utting, and R-ing because I'm not really sure at this point in the game what really even matters that much. I suppose if you've got this point in the game and you're in 1946, you either have won or something's gone colossally wrong. And in that case, because I think you've already won, I'm kind of making an aircraft that just does a little bit of everything. Once again, make your aircraft which you think is most adequate. Clearly, the best one in the game for shooting ships is the guided anti-ship missile. It's the best of the best. And when it comes down to dogfighting potential for a CAS, rocket rail is definitely the best, and jet engine is the best for dogfighting too. But if you want a bit mix of both, go from there. Honorable mentions for Japan. When it comes down to your Chief of the Air Force, ground support is the best one you want to go for. Unfortunately, they're all specialists, which is not very good. I have not done the stats on night operations or weather problems, so I don't know the overall impact. I would hope that weather penalty is probably really beneficial for doing naval strikes because sea regions usually have really bad weather penalties. But today, the weather is fantastic. Even the English Channel. No rain in the English Channel. This game's bugged. However, this will only apply to aircraft based on airports and not carrier-based ones. But if you're using the carrier as a mobile airport, that would work. But if you're actually in a naval combat using carriers, I presume this wouldn't apply. The High Command 2, we have access to air combat training plus 50% age generation. That's pretty good. Also tactical bombing plus 15%. Oh god, that one is the winner. Oh my, the winner chicken dinner. And I suppose as a final secondary note, naval strike is pretty good. And also carriers is pretty good. Man, some of the advisors for High Command for Japan are outstanding. Myos. So you want to start on probably naval aircraft designer, which gives a nice production bonus, which is nice. However, you want to move on to range focus aircraft designer. There is a possibility if you're not a very confident player and you want to focus on stats, you might want to go for the agility guy, but look at the agility penalty. It suffers from a range penalty. So as Japan, you're going to need that range. But overall, you go into here, you want to focus on this one on the top right, which gives raw production cost of 10%. And then this one on the far left here gives an additional 10% production cost, but you need advanced machine tools for that. That's pretty spicy. Probably going down this path is the biggest. But then all the ones at the bottom give medium plane bonuses. So probably want to avoid those ones, because remember, that's either a heavy fighter or a tactical bomber. So you want to focus on the small planes. Ones that say all of the following, they're the best of the best. This one is medium as well. You get the idea, though. When it comes down to Mitsubishi, you've got a choice between production power or raw stats. You're going down this path for agility because you want raw stats, so you want to go for the left one. When it comes down to it, your decisions here aren't a biggie. The only really big choice you're going to make here is ground attack versus air attack. So once again, what do you need to win? Do you need to win the air war to go for air attack? If you've got air superiority, ground attack's the one for the win. And at the very bottom, you've got the option going for range and air attack versus raw production power and getting them out. End of the day, you've gone for Mitsubishi because you want the stats. So in this case, you want to focus on the actual stats and not production. And the final part of my O's is policies. If you want to focus on your dogfighting capabilities, agility is for the win. Overall, the biggest winner is modular assembly, reducing the production costs by 5%, and anything that makes the production costs go down tends to be a win. So it's choice between numbers, which is modular assembly, or raw power, dogfighting power in the air, which is agility. As a final note, Japan tends to struggle with resources such as rubber and aluminium. So this one, vertical integration, can be quite useful. So this is going to reduce the overall number of aluminium rubber costs for your planes by 10%. But be aware there is a downside, because if you are low on those said resources, it will suffer a larger penalty to the production. So it's one of those balancing act things. You can probably hop onto this, check if you can meet the requirements, but if not, after 6 months, move on to something else. It's just a worthy note. The officer cores for Air Force. The sound strategy to begin with is to go to branch spirits, which the added bonus to this is going to give you air experience gain of 0.10 daily over time. Japan is less likely to take advantage of this one because you will need the stats, because you're going to be going to war against China immediately. But if you're looking to stack as much air experience as you can passively as a bonus over time, this is the one you want to go for. It's a bit risky though, because you kind of need the stats when you're going to be fighting against the Chinese. Alternatively, independent air force is the best one to go for here if you want to save your political power. Remember, overall 75% reduction means if you go for these advisors now, they're 12 political power. Wow. Oh, that's really cheap. If you were to hire your chief of the Air Force, then you were to hire tactical bombing expert, air combat training, and also carrier expert, the overall political power cost here is going to be like 150, 200. It will pay itself back in the long run. The hardest part is actually getting 50 air XP in enough time to hire that, because at the end of the day, you need to hire this guy first to be able to select this guy. You can't really get it in reverse order. You can, but it's difficult. Overall, with every game tending to fall towards air crew surveys, which gives you a 25 cost reduction for your air doctrines for every time you select one of them. Spirit of the Air Force Command. This one's a tricky one because there's some really good ones. So first of all, centralized control is when you want to get additional range. If you're in a situation where you're not get 100% range, or you're like maybe less than 70%, probably centralized control is going to give you the extra range by giving you more air mission efficiency projection. If you're in a situation where you are projecting your stats for agility and max speed and air attack because you're trying to win an air war and get that extra edge, airborne heroes is the win. But be aware, you want to have maximum range for that, and you want to have aces. If you've not got either of those things, that's probably not going to be effective for you, but it will give you a massive edge, because 50% extra stats for aces is pretty big. Next up, if you're trying to do a power drop and you can't do it because you're losing by like, I don't know, 5%, something like that, a very small margin, this will push you over the edge by projecting more air power to make you successfully do a power drop. Will this something that Japan regulars do? Probably not, but this is just a nice to know. This is the one where I feel like it makes the big difference. You're tied now between air support mission efficiency, because you're making CAS, or alternatively, you're going to go for battlefield air indiction, which is ground support attack factor. So this is basically going to mean your ground attack damage is going to be 5% higher. So every time you do a CAS tick, the amount of damage you do to strength and organization will be 5% higher, which if it all adds up over time will make a big difference, particularly if you're working with an anti-tank based CAS plane, which does a lot of ground support damage. Alternatively, though, a hidden stat tucked in is whenever your troops are fighting on the ground and projecting their stats into a battle, and a CAS is actively bombing the enemy at the same time, they will gain a stat bonus, which is called air support mission efficiency. And this will increase that amount by an additional 25%. So if you're in a situation where you are ground pounding the enemy, you've got decent divisions because you've got like lots of soft attack, and you want to project more stats overall by using your CAS to the maximum effectiveness, continuous strike is definitely the one you want to go for. So it's either raw damage from the planes or additional damage from the divisions. Does that make sense? It's basically choosing which one's projecting their stats the most. Is it the CAS or is it the divisions on the ground? And whatever has the best stats to project is the one you want to go for there. This one's difficult because it all depends on your composition of your army. If you've gone very heavy on soft attack and you want to project more soft attack, and you have air superiority, and you've got CAS actively bombing, probably mission efficiency is the best one. However, if you've gone for anti-tank CAS planes, and you've got maximally stacked ground attack capabilities, probably battlefield air indiction is probably the way forward. And last and not least is definitely air doctrine. In a sentence, it's battlefield support, because that gives the biggest bonuses to 1, air support mission efficiency and ground attack factor, which I've already just previously explained. And of course here, close air support for the agility, which is something you'll be taking advantage of with CAS as Japan. No lie, there might be something I missed. Let me know in the comments below. Do you want me to cover a different kind of plane for a certain kind of country playing historical versus the AI? Please comment below and I'll show you the most optimal designs and talk about the stats in game. Example, Italy, naval bombers. Is that something you'd be into? Let me know. Or USA, strategic bombers. Is that something you'd be into? Let me know in the comments below. Suggestions, I like them. If you like this kind of video, you might like this one here. Give this one a click. I'll see you later.